Motor car engines improve all the time. So does the fuel which drives them. But we start with the engine because we must understand something of it if we are to grasp the whys and wherefores of petrol research. In all engines, the petrol flow is basically the same. From the tank, through the filter, through the pump, to the carburetor, where the petrol is partly vaporized, partly atomized. That is, broken up into minute droplets by the flow of air, rather like a scent spray. In the manifold, heated by the engine, the droplets too are rapidly vaporized. So into the cylinder, where combustion of the mixture of air and petrol vapor forces the piston down. And so the engine works. Of all derivatives of crude oil, petrol has probably done most to transform our everyday lives. The research man thinks of it rather differently. An intricate mixture of hydrocarbon compounds grouped into olefins, naphthenes and the rest. Also certain additives. And the motorist? Well, he thinks of petrol in terms of performance. Easy starting, quick warm-up, good acceleration. Now, there are in every car engine certain mischievous demons out to cause trouble. This is the volatility demon. Repeated attempts with the starter. But the engine won't come to life. Instead of vaporizing sufficiently, the petrol remains mostly liquid. This is what you could get with petrol of too low a volatility on a cold day. Eventually enough vapor forms, but meanwhile a lot of time, petrol and battery have been wasted. The same volatility demon. But now the opposite happens. Petrol of too high a volatility used on a hot day or in an overheated car. The petrol is vaporizing too easily and in the wrong place, the fuel lines. The result is vapor lock. The pump can't pump vapor, the engine has stalled. Only when the fuel system has cooled down is the flow resumed. Then a kind of Jack Frost demon out to cause icing in the carburetor on cold, damp days, reducing the intake of air, thoroughly upsetting vaporization. And this unsavory fellow, he wants to come up the works, leaving gummy and carbon deposits where he can. You know this? Knocking or pinking, though it's not as common as it used to be. Now let's see what's happening in slow motion. In the cylinder, the mixture of air and petrol vapor burns evenly across in a fraction of a second. But if the mixture explodes, that is knocking. So there they are, the four chief troublemakers. And it is to confound them that laboratories are engaged on continual research. Research not only into the composition of petrols, of course, but into the characteristics of all oil products, fuel oils, lubricants, jet fuels, bitumen, and so on. And today, radioactivity enables the scientists to work more precisely on problems of harmful deposits or the detection of engine wear. In the 100 years that the oil industry has existed, a new world of knowledge has been created. chemists, physicists, mathematicians, engineers, the research teams of the industry. From their studies and experiments have evolved all the forms of oil we know today. In this film, we are concerned with only one form, petrol. We have already mentioned volatility. Petrol is a volatile liquid. Observe that shimmering effect on the wall. You sometimes see it when filling up on a warm day. The petrol, you say, is evaporating or vaporizing. Now, by ordinary distillation, we encourage this tendency of petrol to vaporize. In a few moments, it's not only evaporating, but boiling and distilling off. And all the time, the temperature is rising. But some may well ask, what is the point of all this? Why boil petrol anyway? We will look at the petrol again in diagram. Petrol, you remember, is a mixture of several compounds, shown here for convenience sake in layers. Now a second flask filled with water. Heat it. And at the normal boiling point of water, the thermometer stops. But petrol behaves quite differently when heated. It may be at 33 degrees that the most volatile of its compounds starts boiling. But the thermometer, instead of standing still as with water, continues rising as each compound in turn comes to the boil. Only when the least volatile compound boils does it stop. Petrol then does not, like water, have a boiling point, but a boiling range. Let us look at the petrol again. Petrols can be so blended as to have different boiling ranges. This blend starts boiling at a lower temperature than the other. It's more volatile than the other, so its boiling range differs accordingly. Boiling range is, in fact, the research man's means of measuring volatility when evolving blends of petrol. Various types of apparatus are used for measuring volatility. This is routine laboratory distillation, the boiling range technique in action, measuring the quantity of petrol vaporized off at any given temperature. Obviously, quantity is important. In your car, not only must the petrol vaporize, but enough must vaporize if, for instance, you are to get away to a good start. This apparatus determines the proportion of liquid to vapor when petrol is at various temperatures and pressures. Note the word various. Research aims to produce petrols for any car in any circumstances. We're familiar with the grades, mixture, extra, and so on. But climate and atmospheric pressure come into it too. Petrol for cold mountainous country, petrol for hot places at sea level. In Britain, winter petrol and summer petrol aren't just an advertising gimmick. It is with the help of apparatus such as this, or this, the micro-vapor pressure apparatus, that these different types of petrol are worked out and trial blends tested. Unfortunately, as with so much of this experimental work, you see little happening. It's a kind of push-button research, and the results aren't a gush of perfected petrol, but simply a matter of calculation. The final answer, no more than a figure in a notebook. Now to defeat that unsavory demon out to clog up the works. The essential is that petrol shall be stable. And today, in fact, any tendencies to deteriorate in store, in your tank for instance, or to form gummy deposits in the fuel system, or to burn dirtily on combustion, have been largely overcome. You know yourself, clearing choked jets and frequent decarbonizing aren't the headaches they used to be. Engines themselves have improved, certainly, but that has only made them thirstier for cleaner petrol. Here samples of petrol are being evaporated, and the residue, the gummy deposits, about to be assessed, and the next move planned to diminish them still more. And this is the other kind of deposit, left on piston and cylinder. Such deposits can't, of course, be altogether avoided, but they can be greatly reduced by tracking down the molecules in petrol suspected of causing them. Techniques involving radioactivity, on which the research man is relying more and more for results hitherto elusive, are called in. And the offending molecules are identified by the radiation counter if the deposit provokes telltale clicks when the counter is switched on. With this, we have passed to another of the main inquiries at which research is directed: the behavior of petrol on combustion. To the chemist, each constituent of petrol is a complex arrangement of carbon and hydrogen atoms in molecular patterns typical of paraffins, olefins, aromatics, and the rest. Each behaves differently on combustion. Paraffins, for instance, long, thin molecules, are liable to cause knocking because they burn too willingly. But aromatics and isoparaffins have good anti-knock quality, round, compact molecules able to burn less explosively. Thus, the research man is forever balancing molecules against each other in evolving new blends of petrol, and then forever testing them, this time by fluorescent indicator analysis. Dyes, coloring matter, are added to an experimental blend of petrol, and when shown up by ultraviolet lighting, they confirm the correctness, or otherwise, of the blend's composition. Just now, we mentioned that distressing phenomenon, knock. In this, a knock rate engine, it is being deliberately caused. Now, we talk of octane number sometimes, though we don't always know what we mean, except that 100 octane sounds good. In fact, octane number is no more than the measurement of a petrol's resistance to knock. The higher the number, the greater the resistance. By adjusting the composition of the petrol, the tendency of a petrol to knock can be reduced, and so far reduced that, as the ordinary motorist knows, knocking is rare these days, so long as his engine is in good order. Now the research engineers have taken over from the chemists and physicists. The time has come for the experimental petrols to be put to practical test in engines like these, normal car engines on test mounting. To get away from the noise, the tests are conducted from the corridor outside by remote control. Watch is kept through observation windows. Afterwards, the engines are taken down. Have those demons been rearing their heads again? The engineer will know. And here the tests are carried a step further, on a complete car. Various parts of the engine are connected electrically to a single recording instrument. The driver engages the gears. The engine's performance, from which may be deduced the performance of the petrol, is recorded photographically on one long chart. At every stage, the results of all these laboratory tests and engine trials have guided the blending of experimental petrols. You begin to realize, perhaps, that petrol isn't the simple fuel you may have supposed. On the contrary, it can be produced in astonishing variety. We started off by saying that petrol is an intricate mixture. What's remarkable is how the research men can juggle with its compounds and additives to produce petrols for all types of engines at all seasons. So the latest batch of blends is ready, and we go outside, measuring air temperature and humidity. To avoid any contamination, the blends don't go into the tank, but are connected to the engine from the boot. The ignition is set, the automatic advance mechanism checked. The blends are tested under ordinary conditions in ordinary cars on this disused airfield, conveniently clear of other traffic. Instruments assess the performance of the petrol. To those of us who don't give much thought to petrol beyond whether it suits our car, and naturally enough our pocket, perhaps all this experimental work comes as something of a revelation. Not only better petrol, but petrol which gets maximum efficiency out of modern engines, whatever the conditions. Nice to see someone with no petrol problems. However, back to business. Since Britain can seldom guarantee its weather, the experiments are often transferred abroad, to Scandinavia, for instance. A panel of ordinary owners is recruited to test a variety of petrols. To test for easy starting, the cars are left out all night. In the morning, the temperature of the radiator is taken by each owner and noted down. Easy starting, and what the driver also wants in this wintry weather, quick warm-up. In other words, the petrol needs to be highly volatile. But under the warm skies of the Mediterranean, it's the opposite. Quite different blends of petrol are tested here. Far less volatile, if vapor lock, never far away at high temperatures, is to be avoided. After such hard driving, a halt is a positive invitation to vapor lock, for the fuel lines of a hot engine at rest become even hotter. Air temperature and humidity are taken, engine temperatures are observed and noted down. A sample of the petrol is sucked up into a vacuum container. Its condition at the time of the test will be checked later on. Now, off they go. No vapor lock, no stalling. Evidently, the experimental petrols have been correctly blended. And the next step? Back to the laboratories. Those observations which were noted down, those earlier calculations, the figures in a notebook, all now to be related one to another, argued over, clarified, hour after hour. And what does it come down to? A report. But what does it mean to you and me, this report? It all seems rather remote from our petrol pump up the road. But no. For soon the report has been studied at the refinery, and a modification here or there is made in one or other of the processes of refining. The modifications may not be anything sensational. Most times they're not. But whether it's that our petrol is just that much more economical, or that much more powerful, or whether the engine starts that much more easily, another worthwhile result of research has reached us, who, the world over, use 10 million gallons of petrol every hour of every day.